So, John Brown is affiliated with a lot of sus characters. As people are painting him as a revolutionary, he was good, he got the cause going. Again, Lincoln was not fond of him. Again, in the 1850s, he was just hearing about in the news. He's like, this guy's freaking crazy. Right you are. And basically, this guy is highlighting in history how this person connects to this person, that person connects to this person. If you guys want to get into all those genealogies of who connects to who, this is what that kind of book's for. I'm just reading a little bit here and there. John Wilkes Booth, as I said, attended John Brown's hanging, and he was noted of saying to someone who was standing nearby, "I'm never going to let something like that happen to me." He thought it was very morbid seeing a man hanging from the gallows, and so that already gave a little bit of a hint that sometime in the future, if somebody wanted to hang him, he was not going to stand for it.
Aloha and welcome to another episode, guys. Today's special guest is Brandon Kroll, an independent researcher known for his deep dives into ancient history, occult symbolism, and hidden agendas. His presentations are always packed with information and mind-bending insights. So I'm really looking forward to where this one goes because today we're unpacking his latest work on Abraham Lincoln. And guys, I really suggest you watching this either on YouTube, Rumble, or Patreon because Brandon brings in a lot of visuals with his presentation. So it's a little bit more exciting if you can watch it as he speaks. Now, before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and hit that bell so you're always in the loop. Your support helps this show grow. And remember, all episodes are free on Patreon, where you'll find exclusive content not seen on YouTube. If you'd like to support the show further, consider donating on Patreon or buy me a coffee. Every little bit helps us keep creating content for you. Now, let's bring on Brandon into the conversation. Enjoy the show.
I think I have to give a little bit of a background as to why I was intrigued by this particular points of Lincoln. I am a huge Lincoln fan. I'm not fond of federal government. I am not fond of the state right things. If anything, I'm becoming an anarchist, and I'm not saying I put on a mask and throw Molotov cocktails. It is more anarcho, as in I'm against rulers, and there's no king but Christ. And then individual, as in libertarian, I believe in individualism. You yourself should dictate how you live your life. As a disciple, as a follower, you every day make that your case. That's what you strive for. I don't promote capitalism. I don't promote communism. I'm just in the middle saying I don't do big government. However, also like history. And I'm very fond of Lincoln. I have read books that are written by people like 1930s that were closer to eyewitnesses. I've read countless stuff, and I went down this one particular rabbit trail of connecting the Jesuit Masonic alliance that offed Lincoln. This is something where it kind of defeats the narrative of some people claiming that Lincoln was a dictator, as I think it was lady on Instagram, libertarian homeschooler or whatever, and I was chuckling. I said, well, have you read this other book? No. Have you read this thing? I said, yes, I did read that because I'm a Lincolnite. And I was like, and his points don't fill in these blanks. Which is very paramount because I think there's always several sides to a coin, right? You have to look at this side, that side, and then you'll come to your conclusion. However, I see there's a very strong bias. I like bringing out this fact for consideration, and by the end you'll be like, I see what you're talking about, because it kind of defeats the narrative that every single person that gets in is always controlled. So, without any further ado, Target Lincoln is the name of the episode. This is just a lengthier description of what this is called. Come on, next slide. Why are we not sliding? We're not sliding. Technical difficulties. Why is it doing this now? Come on, guys. I hate you. I hate you. Oh gosh, okay, come on. Why is it what is going on? Hold on, sorry.
No, don't be. I'll edit
This
all
is
this
a
out.
first. What is going on? Canva, bad. Why am I in editing mode during a presentation? That is going to irritate the hell out of me now. Excuse me, guys. I'm sorry. Are we good now? Okay, we're good now. All right. So, as I was saying, we kind of have to look always back in history to kind of gauge when somebody, again, the most popular as opposed to the Mexican-American War, we're more familiar with the Civil War in America. If anything, if you had to get the highlights, it's 1776 Revolutionary War, maybe a little bit of a boop of 1812. We don't really talk too much about it because we got our butts kicked. And then we talk about the Civil War, right? And from there, we then go World War One, World War Two, and then Cold War. Boom, here we are, war against terror. That's kind of how we summarize most of American history, unfortunately. Unfortunately, but there's always these little skirmishes and or minor wars that were going on, and I found it interesting when President Polk, when he was running for office, he basically said, "You get me into office, and I will double the size of America." Now, so this is basically his promise. I only need to run for one term and I will be able to do this. How he aimed to achieve this is provoke a false flag event. So he basically sent a cavalry contingent unit to be riding very close to a Mexican fort. Of course, Mexico is seeing a foreign force coming very close to their fort. So, needless to say, they open fire. And they kill a couple of Americans, they wound a couple others, and all this stuff. So, and in Washington D.C., everybody is outraged. They say, "Oh, look, they attacked U.S. American soldiers. This is uncalled for. We need to retaliate and make sure nobody does that to the Americans, because we're the tough guys here, and that's just not right, and it was uncalled for." So, Mexico had invaded our territory. See how we already reworked this, and shed blood of our fellow citizens on our own soil, according to President Polk. This is a quote. And Lincoln, who was a Congress or senator at that time, he said, in contrast, around that time, Polk was trying to prove by telling the truth what he could not prove by telling the whole truth. And this was on January 12th of 1848. Now, at that time, everybody was looking at Lincoln going, "Dude, shut up. That's political suicide. You're not patriotic. Americans died. How dare you say such things?" He's like, "No, I'm saying we're about to get ourselves into a war that we instigated. And I don't think that's fair and transparent to the rest of the American people that we're now going to send more people to go fight this based on a lie." And that sounds very similar to a lot of other stuff. Again, if you look more into Founding of America, Rulers of Evil by Tupper Saucy, you can print it off from online if you have that resource. Very interesting, but you'll find out how, Masons and Jesuits connections to this stuff again. So anyways, this kind of proves that he's not in a dictator mode, that he's all on board with everybody else in Congress, Senate, that's all pro-American, let's shed blood. This proves that this is a guy that is a little bit, let's pause and reflect, because I don't think there's a necessity of always provoking something unnecessarily. Now, this clip, the gentleman's voice that you're going to be hearing in the background, Myron Fagan, from 1967. Now, he did not have all of his ducks in a row, but it's a very compelling speech that explains the foundation of the Illuminati. Granted, he doesn't seem to realize that Washington himself as well was controlled in this clip. However, he does piece a lot of stuff together, and he mentions a secret society that was connected with Lincoln's assassination. Now, he did not have the name at that time. That's what we're covering on today. And it was this organization was the precursors of the modern KKK that most people are familiar with, as we somewhat covered in our last episode with the Hoods. Yeah. Let me know if you can hear. If not, I'll give a rough condensed.
It's very quiet.
I have my volume on the highest, but basically he's saying Weishaupt on 1776 doing stuff with the New World. He had a foundation of already wanting to do the New World Order plot. Judah Benjamin was in charge of the Southern War Cabinet. He was the whatever war, Secretary of War. He had connections with Rothschild, as well did in Lincoln's cabinet, as we'll be touching on. I'm not really fond of one of the guys when I found out in the administration who basically backstabbed him by holding back very pertinent information to an upcoming assassination that he should have been very transparent about, and he did have foreknowledge of. Really hate that about this clip. Some people can always hear it for about 2.5 minutes and the rest can't. So basically there was other members in Lincoln's cabinet that were trying to sell him into a financial dealing with the Rothschilds, and Lincoln was like, nope, we're not doing that. We're not going to be selling ourselves, our currency, to a European power. This is how others have fallen. So he says, no, we're not doing that. Basically he ticked off the Rothschilds just as the Tsars, or the Russia, did after the War of 1812. They basically put a little bit of a cap on the early UN foundation after the Napoleonic Wars. They wanted to encompass everybody, but Russia said no. They caused a little bit of a hiccup, as it were.
Tsar did when he torpedoed their first League of Nations at the Congress in Vienna.
Heard it for a second.
So I just want to get to the highlight points of and explain it. So this is Jacob Schiff. This is a gentleman that Rothschild sent over to basically, after Lincoln's assassination, he sent him over to basically start buying out the banking system within the U.S. Rothschild basically groomed this gentleman. This gentleman was also the individual who financed Schofield's Bible, the very infamous Schofield Bible that promotes Zionism, or today, modern day dispensationalism, where there is a sacred land, there is a chosen people, we need to go over there and fight for them. If you're familiar with that enough?
No.
Okay, so basically modern evangelicals that are saying we need to go over there and fight for God's people, this is the guy that started that with that translation of the Bible, and Rothschild funded it.
Wow.
And even the word dispensationalism is Zionism for Gentiles, where you're still thinking, instead of Galatians 3:28 and 29 or Colossians 3:11, that there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave or free, for you're all one in Christ Jesus, and if you be of Christ, you are sorry, I just totally butchered that. But basically saying we're not doing race and ethnicity anymore. It's now by accepting Christ as the Word made flesh, and you're now going to start living that. What their dispensationalism states is no. God didn't do that. We're the bride of Christ, but they still have their own special contract clause with God, which totally contradicts a lot of the other stuff in the Bible, where you are Antichrist who denies the Father and the Son being equivalent of the Word of God. And that's 1 John 2:22. What do I mean by that? Look into John 1:14. Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. And then you can look into, do I have it here? I think I have it here. Yes, I do. 1 John 5:7-8. For there are three that bear witness in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Spirit, confirming Christ is the Word of God. And these three are one. And there are three that bear witness in heaven, the Spirit, and the water, and the blood. These three agree in one. Second verse basically implying, bear witness in things on earth, Spirit, right? Spirit, the Holy Spirit that was given to us when Christ drew his last breath. Temple veil ripped in two, as we explain in God's Been Divorced. That's giving us the gift of the Holy Spirit by the shedding of his body or breaking of that, right? And then the blood, right? And then baptism is the water. You're dying to self here. I don't know, but and then Revelation 19:13, when Christ returns, he is known as the Word of God. So when I'm telling people, basically, if you want to accept Christ, New Testament is updated user terms of agreement to be the people of God. It's not special ethnicity clause or chosen people plus the bride of Christ, right? There's none of that. None of that. Another verse, I think it's in Galatians or Colossians. It says, if possible, the Antichrist will attempt to deceive the very elect. Elect in Greek, translated, chosen. It is inferring to Christians. So, dispensationalism, the very etymology of that is interesting. Dis, set apart. Pensation comes from compensation. So now we break down that word. It means set apart, compensation of what? Land. Why? Because you have a 3,000-year-old deed and you think you can come over? So basically, that's like me coming to Hawaii and saying, God gave this to me from the UK back when I was like Irish Scots roots, and now Hawaii is officially mine. No, it's not. You know, yes, it is, because God told me so. Here's the document. Oh, okay. So I'm just supposed to accept kind of that mentality. So, but yeah, nice guy. You might want to talk to this guy, Steven Sizer. He can give you a nice insight with that, but he's a lovely gentleman. Older, was it the Anglican Church disowned him? Because he was going down this route and they're saying you're being anti-Semitic. He's like, no, I'm just explaining scripture that you guys don't want to talk about. So basically, he was explaining how even up to the Titanic, they got rid of all the people that were blocking this push for taking over the banking system in the U.S. And there was a secret society that offed Lincoln. Now, that secret society, he did not have a name. This is what we're touching on. It was known as the Knights of the Golden Circle. And this is a book you can get by Randolph W. Farmer. A bit of a tedious read. If you're a historian and you can deal with heavy reading, it's good. For me, it was... I don't know. I love history, but this was a kind of a hard one. Unless you want to actually know the topic, it's not one I would pick up right away, but it does fill in a lot of blanks. Something I found interesting, this was their pendant ring or badge, medal. And you notice that has a little bit of a similarity with the Black Felties cross of the Nazis. Just finding it interesting. Medals in America on uniforms started in the Civil War, if I was reading that correctly. And they were given, I believe it was Denmark, somewhere in the Netherlands area, that helped give that to us. As well, caskets was originally brought to America during the Civil War. Prior to that, we just chucked you in the dirt. So there's 2 trivia facts there. So this is a little bit of an excerpt from that book, and basically just giving a summation of what their outline plan. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Why did they form? What they formed? And it says, indeed, the KJC, Knights of the Golden Circle, every time I say that, could not have induced the secession of Texas without favorable coverage from the press. And as this piece written by the San Antonio Herald that ran on the front page of the Dallas Herald just a few days before the secession election, titled Order of the Knights of the Golden Circle, Its Objects, Aim, and Principles. The KJC is a Southern institution in counteracting of the power of emigrant aid and wide-awake societies of the North. It is lawful company based on Christian principles, looking to winning the empire for the South. It recognizes and propagates slavery as a divine institution, wisely established by Jehovah himself and fraught with all the elements of social, moral, and political good to the Negro, and conducive to the best interests of our country. It inculcates the doctrines of the manifest destiny and teaches that the star of the empire is southward, hence the Texas Southern Star. It would show an outlet for the free Negro population of the southern states. It would gain control of the Gulf of Mexico and the vast trade thereof. It would keep lands peculiarly adapted to our system of labor at the hands of the abolitionist majority of the North, and it would cultivate a chivalric spirit of our people and tie them together in a bond of brotherhood. It would give peace and protection to society and help elevate and ennoble our race. It would protect the weak and punish the bad. It would revive in our midst the days of chivalry and at the same time furnish the South with a complete and effective military system. So basically, in summation of what they're saying, slavery, cool, we love it. We want to now annex with the Southern cause all of the territories going to the left, Arizona, New Mexico, a little swash into northern Mexico today, all of Mexico down here, all these countries from Guatemala, all these other Nicaragua, I'll fill in the blank, Panama, and constantly they were trying to filibuster Cuba. They wanted to take Cuba over and Haiti, basically creating a circle, a golden circle where you make money, profitable. Now, another incentive for this was that during the Haitian rebellion, the Haitian slaves, they killed all of the masters on the island when they revolted. In the South, needless to say, oh my gosh, what happens if that happens here? We're outnumbered by the slaves. This is bad. We need to form a coalition to prevent that from ever happening. So you see a little bit of the formulation of a KKK mindset of we need to keep pure, we need to fight back. It's already going wrong. And this was back, what was it, the Haiti revolt? I can't remember that exact date. Somewhere early 1800s. When these guys started forming was around 1828, 1830s, somewhere in that period. And then by the time we get to the Civil War, they have almost like 30 years of experience. One individual, they were racist against not only Negroes, but against Native Americans. He literally put down on his tax filing, Injun killer. Yeah, this is a sick bunch right here. When I put that in a comment somewhere on Instagram, someone actually cheered that as a good thing. I said, that's pretty sick. Yeah, that tells you where we are.
Yeah, you should think they would get banned for that.
They should be, but again, they'd have to read the context. Like, well, he didn't say any bad language. He just blah 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 blah, right? And that's the way the censors are working. They're making them be promoted, and the real people being like, "Are you serious right now?" If you knew real history, John Wilkes Booth. We see him doing the classic little hidden Masonic hand in this photo, and in this book here onto the right, absolutely love it. If you guys are somebody that says I want to know about Booth, I would put this in the top 5. I'm not sure about other books, but this particular one, I loved it. I got a lot of insight to who he was as a kid, all the way up to the time of his death. It fills in a lot of blanks. Come to find out, he was actually engaged, which we never hear about in history. He had photos of 5 women when they were going through his body. A couple of them actresses, a couple of them other ladies of the night, shall we say. I absolutely loved it. But it was also explaining, well, not specified, that there's a potential that Booth was meeting with somebody in New England. It also explains that he had a little bit of a period where he was touring in Texas and Oklahoma, where the Knights of the Golden Circle were most prominent. And it is likely there he was recruited and he was getting schooled in the North before the assassination went down somewhere in New England, because the guy does imply that there's a little bit of a timeline around a couple days here where they don't know what he was doing. But he's like, that's not really a case. This is where I'm bringing these other books going. I think there is a case to be made here. As well, he was friends with Andrew Johnson, Abraham Lincoln's vice president. I found that interesting. I said, okay, so they were with the socialite crew. They were hanging out with mutual ladies of the night. I think it was Kentucky, Tennessee, somewhere in that region. And Booth had organized a little rendezvous with the vice president and a lady who wrote in a message to him, "I will let you do anything to me." Yes, so she had the hots for him, and she might have seduced the vice president into that room that night where, when the assassins were going through and they had the list, and this guy bailed out because he got, scared and he ran away. Now, the official story that Johnson said is, I was intoxicated. He was very known to be a huge alcoholic at the time of Abraham Lincoln's assassination. However, we happen to know that he was spending the night with this lady. So he was using the cover of everybody would believe I was intoxicated, as opposed to saying I was hanging out with an acquaintance of John Wilkes Booth, the guy that assassinated the president. I'm just saying. Just saying. And again, that's compiling from all these different sources going, okay. That's very interesting. So, this gentleman here, Albert Pike, I'm related to. Bad man. Bad man. I do not condone him. He is an uncle of sorts of mine. I know this because of Pikes Peak, Colorado. I'm related to Zebulon Montgomery Pike as another cousin in the family. Purple Mountain's Majesty, that was based off of that Pike that he discovered. Yeah. So when the Myron Fagan in that 1967 clip, and don't feel bad if you didn't get all the audio here, you can look it up on YouTube, or you can type it into your Facebook top thing, and a video will pop up with clips, and you can listen to it there. Albert Pike, basically, in 1871, was writing a outline which mirrors exactly what was being spoken by Myron Fagan in 1967 of how they're going to conquer the world, how they're going to have several world wars, and how they're going to implement them into the means of achieving their objective of a new world order. He was the, interestingly enough, he was the coordinator of the Southern tribes. Meaning, so basically, as much as we get a lot of the crap with the South being very racist, very this, they said, okay, these people that are in the Oklahomas and Texas near the reservations and all this, what if we promise them seats on the council in the southern states, or like we can say, you can become senators in Congress if we win, and we're going to do all this stuff for you. In exchange, you're going to act as our vanguard groups. You're going to act as mercenaries, in a sense, for the Confederate cause. Now, considering the federal government was going, all right, I know we're supposed to feed these reservations, but during a time of war, that's a long way to go with supplies, and the possibility that they could get whacked by Southern forces, they basically started cutting off food to the tribes. This giving an incentive for, well, why would I not want to join the South? Because then I can feed my family, which, again, this all backfired. And eventually, by 62, 63, after the Monitor, and was it the Virginia, where they had the first steel ships going at each other? Armored ships. Yeah. Sorry. If you're in the Civil War, you know what I'm talking about. But during that time, they had a little fight on a thing called Pea Ridge. But a lot of them post that point, it started becoming a thing where the Confederacy was starting to track down other tribes, and a lot of these other tribes and or were family members, and they were like, why am I doing this? This is not making any sense. So they started to defect back to the Union and fight for them. So this Albert Pike was the guy in charge of all these Indian tribes as the mediator. Just fun little trivia fact. Never explained that before on another show, so exclusive. So his quote, "The First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati, Freemasons, to overthrow the power of the czars in Russia and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism."
Wow.
Now, again, you look into Marx, he actually is something, what is his name? Levi Mordecai, something. Again, Karl Marx is not his real name. He was hired by a group basically to form the Communist Manifesto and to perpetuate all this. Darwin as well was a 33-degree Freemason. So
Wow.
you see they formulate this, and then they start funneling it to where they want it, and then they create imperialist capitalism on one side, and they create, the fear of totalitarianism of communism on the other. And as a Christian, they're saying, well, you have to choose one or the other. I don't support either monetary system because one exploits other third world countries, the other one oppresses their people, right? Either or, somebody's getting screwed over at all this. So he was writing this in a letter to Mazzini back in 1871. Mazzini was in charge of the European Freemasons based off of Italy. He also says the Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agenter of the Illuminati between the political Zionists, current modern-day Israel, and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and the political Zionism of the State of Israel mutually destroy each other. Interesting. So they want all of this chaos to go down over there. Yes, this is not a coincidence. They have been formulating this since the dawn of time. Are you familiar with this gentleman on the left?
No.
Or your right? John Brown. This gentleman, you can find him in a dozen of old Hollywood movie depictions. They frequently have this thing. What is it? The truth will be mine. Trying to think of a song. There's an old hymnal, and originally it was to the lyrics of John Brown. His truth will marching on, glory, glory, hallelujah. It was affiliated with John Brown, as in like this great titan. He had to use terroristic tactics to get his message across that we need to purge the South of these slave owners. Now, John Wilkes Booth actually met this individual. He was in Virginia. He was working out of a theater. And when basically John Brown was apprehended, he was basically getting in line to be hanged. And the South were like, we need to basically fortify the place where he's being imprisoned, because if his supporters let him out, we might have another incident. Because John Brown was trying to take over Harper's Ferry, which was an ammunition port. And basically his plan was to take this place, take all the armory from there, the guns and whatnot, start going through the South and arming the slaves, thus fulfilling the exact fear of the Haiti Rebellion, where the slaves rose up and started slaying their masters. I find this to be a little bit interesting because nobody's connected this stuff, but I said, how is it his plan was to do the very thing that they feared? Right? I'm like, there's got to be a connection here. So I started digging into this other book, The Curse of Canaan, by Eustace Mullins. That is Eustace Mullins, Mullins. Does fill in a lot of blanks. There's first couple chapters I'm like, meh, but then the rest I'm kind of like, I think he's got a solid case here. So the New England religion, quite simply, was the latest modern heresy preached by the people of Shem. The cult was directed by Reverend William Channing. One of his principal assistants was a teacher named John Brown, the son of the infamous revolutionary who was to die on the gallows for his insurrection at Harper's Ferry. This cult survives today principally in the preachings of some who call themselves fundamentalists. These renegades preach the doctrine of the will of Canaan, and they work avidly for the final defeat and the extermination of the people of Shem. These transcendentalists did not bother to conceal the fact that they took the basics of their religious doctrines directly from the Kabbalah. Now, to quote Albert Pike from Morals and Dogma, quote, Freemasonry is the search for light, Illuminati, as you will see, leads us directly to the Kabbalah. Now, interesting thing about the Kabbalah, I think, as we covered before, the very top is known as Corona, the very base known as X. This is what these guys, they're transhumanists, right? Principles of how to get there. Preaching that every person has an oversoul and that there is no final authority in any religious matter, thus invalidating the entire Bible and the pronouncements of God. Their true leaning was always dominated by Oriental despotism, and their doctrines originated in the Far East. Consequently, their first line of attack was to overthrowing of the Constitution of the United States. The principal safeguard of the people of Shem, their campaign resulted in the adoption of the amendments, which totally invalidated the original intent of the Constitution. This is the basis of the decisions of the federal judges and the federal courts today, always against the people of Shem, always strengthening and the stranglehold of the Oriental despotism over our captive people. A little bit more of an elaboration. So, have you ever watched a documentary known as Amendment 13?
No.
Worthwhile, even though there's a little bit of a liberal bias, probably a lot towards the end because they endorse Hillary and Obama. However, Historical context is important because it kind of makes you look a little bit at the what do you call it, the liberal humanitarian, emphasize the humanitarian aspect of why they're emphasizing Amendment 13. Now, Amendment 13 basically says you cannot have slaves, with the exception that we can have that with prisons. We can have a prison slave population. Now, as one girl was explaining on a clip that I saw, she was stating that there are people who are in the prison system that are basically producing license plates, right? And for this company, they're doing it for pennies on the dime. However, these same people, once they have left their incarcerated status, they go to apply for that same company and they said, no, we can't hire you. And they go, why? Because you're a felon. So you exploit the worker, but you get the product, but then you're over here like, no, we can't, really? So again, America is one of the most populated with the slave intake. I don't even want to throw out stats because I'm going to get some people to fact check me, but we have a very high population of prison, right? And you have to kind of wonder, do they create the problem so that they can keep a workforce going? Because it started out slavery bad. Then they went to child labor from like what, 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, Victorian London. Then they're like, okay, kids' fingers are getting caught in machines. That might not be too good. What are we going to do now? What if we tell women they have rights? Are you crazy? No, listen, hear me out. What if we tell them they have rights and then we start inducting them into the workforce? Your point? We double our work. We have not just men, we have women now working in our factories, and we'll double our income overnight. What about them? That's just the brilliant part. Now two people are going to start being taxed, and we double our fortune on that. Oh, I like modern slave state solution, right? Feminism ended up shooting yourself in the foot. Not that I'm endorsing anything of that, I'm just saying, well, basically what they did is we're going to pull you out of the home, the domestic aspect, and we're going to put you out there and work for us. You're going to work for the man, thinking you're free, but being exploited while you do it. Yeah.
I have a question. So the
yeah,
Shem the Shem you were talking about, is that the Bible Shem, Noah's son Shem? Oh,
yeah. So
that line of people.
correct. So they say that the people of Shem were a little bit closer, like they wanted to actually live what God said. Curse of Canaan. This is where I veer. He's saying that it's solely based on there's a black witch that got onto the ark, and because Ham mated with her, this is how we have the blah blah blah. That part, I'm like, however, what I found interesting, the name of allegedly this black witch was Nama, Namah. It's variations of a couple of spellings, kind of like Kabbalah. Now, what I found interesting, allegedly the name of Noah's wife was Nama. Now, this guy was saying some people have pitched the idea that perhaps when, the sin that Ham committed, whatever, was seeing Noah naked. Other people are saying, well, because if you see your father and mother naked, that is the equivalent of seeing both, blah, blah. Maybe he did something with his mom when Noah was intoxicated, and maybe he did something with his mom then. However, I was going, it's kind of interesting that the name Nama comes up. Did he, because like allegedly, I think another thing was saying that they couldn't have sex on the ark, whatever, I don't know. But if he did, and you wanted to curse the son of that union, Canaan, and then the descendants thereof, I don't know, but there was a little something that was making me go, yeah, because that's basically making out with your mom, so you're inverting the human race, so therefore you would put a curse upon that, and allegedly, that might be where we get the synagogue of Satan. It's an inversion seed, which also goes with Nimrod doing his mother and having their incestuous pagan doppelganger of Christ, Tammuz, aka Hermes, alchemical tablets, as we've covered before in Lord of the Stars. This is where that comes from, the idea of inversion, of going counter what God intended. So the generations are supposed to go this way, not inverted that way, which is what they constantly are doing. Now, I don't have proof, but allegedly as well, they want to have like a slaughter event of the people of Shem. That's known as like the Nama Project. Again, he was saying this and he had some citations. Granted, take it all with a grain of salt. But it does make you really relook at the world. After, if I had to recommend an order, Rulers of Evil by Tupper Saucy, Bloody Zion by Edward Hendry, and then read Curse of Canaan by Eustace Mullins. Doing so in that order will kind of give you a little bit more a solidification of, okay, maybe some of the stuff he talks about is not cuckoo. And again, you have to read it with an 80-20%, because I do admit there's a little bit of that. But when you look up the name Nema, I was like, well, he didn't know that because he wrote this in the 1980s. I was like, that's kind of scary. That kind of implies, yes, he might have done something with Mommy, which does mirror what we see with Nimrod. So I'm giving a little bit of, there's an alleged possibility. Yeah, this sounds like a similar MO. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, that might have been way too much, but a lot of context for something like this.
Yeah.
So what John Brown was starting to do, he basically was starting to go, I think it was a Bleeding Kansas, yeah. He was starting to terrorize people who were slave owners, and they're one of the first people that he went after with his kids was a slave owner, and they beat him to death with like a cutlass. Now, was this right? No, but it did kind of get the talk going. And he basically was starting, as they say here, John Brown's orgy of terrorism. Now, the Cabot Bank provided $57,000 for John Brown's military expenses. It's basically to conduct this. There is no record that it was ever repaid or that any attempt was made to collect. It was the donation to the cause of terrorism, a familiar technique of bankers. So we're already seeing that the bankers are funding a chaos, and then they get money off of the conflict again. Other financial supporters of John Brown included Murray Forbes, a wealthy railroad builder. His mother was a Perkins, who served on the Republican National Committee. Between 1827 and 1843, the plans of the conspirators received a temporary setback with the emergence of the anti-Masonic Party as a national force. Now, this was because there was a gentleman by the name of Captain Morgan, I believe it was Upper State New York, former Mason, said, I'm going to come forward, I'm going to publish a book exposing everything that goes on behind closed doors. Now, if we know anything about Masons, they have that little hush pose, you're not supposed to do that. So he was incarcerated, and as opposed to getting a trial, certain individuals opened the door and let him be taken out into the night, and where he went from there, no one knows. Yeah. So this obviously, I think I was in 1826, this obviously started an anti-Masonic movement of, what the frick, guys, you can't just, where's the just, okay, secret society, making people disappear in the middle of the night, not good. So this is why this gained traction. This political movement threatened to expose an entire conspiracy as a Masonic operation. From its outset, the anti-Masonic Party was handicapped by its inability to penetrate a shroud of secrecy which veiled every act of the conspirators. Without direct evidence of this conspiracy, which could be presented in the court or laid before the people, they soon lost their very popular support. In fact, they were soon infiltrated by the very conspirators whom they sought to expose, and they were rendered impotent. Albert Pike, the guy we saw before, big lard beard, later boasted that the anti-Masonic Party was actually one of the greatest assistants to us. After its dissolution, Freemasonry never again faced an organized opposition within the United States. Those who mention the subject are quickly discredited as poor, overwrought fools or paranoid know-nothings. Now, that was actually what John Wilkes Booth was originally registered as, was the Know-Nothing Party. Basically, they best way to recommend finding out what that is all about. What was the name of the book? The Fenian Raid into Canada. Can't remember the name of the author, but it's very interesting. All the Irish, basically from the north and the south, after the Civil War, they made several raids into Canada, trying to basically cause a war on two fronts for the Irish over in Ireland and on the U.S. soil, and it caused a huge scandal. Very interesting thing, but it explained a little bit more about the know-nothings, and basically when they were caught, they were like, "Oh, I don't know anything about that," but they were vandalizing a lot of the Irish and persecuting them. As we've heard in history, this is a little bit more of the party affiliation with that. Who Masons see behind every tree. In most cases, they are quickly consigned to the nearest lunatic asylum, a la Soviet communism's handling of dissidents. Now, Massachusetts was the birthplace of Albert Pike, who became a national leader in the American Masonry. Higginson actively assisted Reverend Parker in the attack on the courthouse and engaged in many other illegal, nefarious activities. His cousin married Theodore Roosevelt. Again, I'm just giving a few names. Some of this is kind of a lot to go all the way into. Just pick up the books. I'm just giving you a rough rundown of what to look into. Samuel Gridley Howe and his wife, Julia, founded and edited a fiery anti-slavery newspaper, The Commonwealth. Like so many in the Canaanite agitators in the United States, Gridley was descended from Calvinist revolutionaries. His ancestor was the officer in Cromwell's army, John Ward of Gloucester, who later fled to the United States to avoid punishment for the atrocities he committed under the banner of Cromwell. Franklin Benjamin Sanborn was a leading disciple of Reverend Parker and Ralph Waldo Emerson. The Senate ordered its arrest in 1860. He had been the principal agent for John Brown in New York since 1857. So basically, he was acting as an intermediator of funding and all this stuff. George Luther Stearns married into the Train family. He was later the leader of the free soldiers and anti-slavery agitators in the state of Kansas. Their depredations gave rise to the term Bloody Kansas. He donated a large sums to John Brown and bought a farm for the terrorist and his family. The chief agent of Stearns in Kansas was the Martin Conway, originally from Baltimore. Conway was sent to Kansas to lead the Free State forces there. He later became the first congressman from Kansas on October 11th of 1871. He fired 3 shots at Senator Pomeroy, wounding him, and Conway was taken to St. Elizabeth's Hospital, where he was judged hopelessly insane and later died there. So, John Brown is affiliated with a lot of sus characters. As people are painting him as a revolutionary, he was good, he got the cause going. Again, Lincoln was not fond of him. Again, in the 1850s, he was just hearing about in the news. He's like, this guy's freaking crazy. Right you are. And basically, this guy is highlighting in history how this person connects to this person, that person connects to this person. If you guys want to get into all those genealogies of who connects to who, this is what that kind of book's for. I'm just reading a little bit here and there. John Wilkes Booth, as I said, attended John Brown's hanging. And he was noted of saying to someone who was standing nearby, I'm never going to let something like that happen to me. He thought it was very morbid seeing a man hanging from the gallows. And so that already gave a little bit of a hint that sometime in the future, if somebody wanted to hang him, he was not going to stand for it. Which, very interesting with how he died. So this abolitionist propaganda caused widespread resentment throughout the South. And on December 16th of 1835, the state of South Carolina issued a formal resolution on the matter, resolved that the formation of the abolitionist societies and the acts of doings of certain fanatics calling themselves abolitionists in the slaveholding states of this confederacy and are direct violation of the obligations of the Compact of the Union, dissocial and incendiary in their extreme. Note that in 1835, South Carolina used the term common until the outcome of the Civil War, a confederacy of states associated under the provisions of a compact, the Constitution of the United States. The abolitionist propaganda did not constitute a direct invasion of the southern states, and as such was undeclared state of war. It was also, the South Carolina Revolution pointed out, a direct violation of the terms of the compact Constitution. Nevertheless, this invasion by propaganda continued, the abolitionist stuff. It continued to invade the South and eventually led to a direct military invasion of the Civil War. Yeah, this is just talking a little bit about 1845, 1871, that letter to Mazzini about 3 world wars. It's giving a little bit more about his Young America movement in the United States. And he was growing abolitionist movement, so he has already connections with the abolitionists. He was a 33-degree Mason in Italy in charge of that. So why is he affiliated with abolition? Well, isn't abolition good, Brandon? Yes, but they're using it for the wrong means, and they're doing it through the wrong avenue, like beating people with a cutlass. Why? Because they're trying to create dissension so that they can split the union and then they can divide it up. Why? Well, we're going to cover that. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court paid dearly for this decision. His name has almost been entirely erased from the legal history of this nation. He was repeatedly threatened with house arrest during the Civil War by President Lincoln. This guy was quite staunchly causing a lot of obstacles for Lincoln. I think it was, what was it? What is the legal term? Habeas corpus. Basically, you can't get, you basically were going to eliminate your right to a trial, which was what they're doing right now with the immigrants. Basically, we can basically overlook that. We're going to disprove of that because you're not an American citizen. However, it says persons. It does not emphasize citizen, which a little bit of a loophole in the legality terms. It says if it's a person, you technically do have a case that anybody who is a person has the right to a free trial. In a time of war, when you have people walking around in Maryland that can easily go up and the president, I think he had the right to do this, but again, he was constantly the Supreme Court guy here. He was causing rife with President Lincoln. Now, some say it's a dictator move. I'm chuckling because back then, dictator. Now Trump's doing it. Anyways, just whatever. But after the war, his 2 elderly daughters, shunned as prospective brides, eked out of a precarious existence as government clerks at the very bottom of the pay scale, always on the verge of complete destitution. After the Dred Scott decision, events moved rapidly towards the actual military confrontation, with the Knights of the Golden Circle taking their places throughout the southern states. John Brown then attacked Harper's Ferry, an incident which was intended to set off a slave uprising throughout the South. The anticipated popular revolution failed to materialize, and Brown was captured and hanged. To this day, he remains a martyr of the Kabbalistic circles of New England, the fundamentalists, and their ideological leader, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who wrote, "He makes the gallows as glorious as the cross." Emerson later promoted John Brown as a new saint in the calendar.
Wow.
Yeah. So even the Secretary of War, Seward, the guy who eventually bought Alaska for us, he objected to this move of arousing provocation against Fort Sumter and sending reinforcements. Lincoln himself was eagerly anticipating the approaching bloodbath and would hear of no compromise. So basically, some people are stating, okay, he wanted the bloodbath. I am over here thinking no, because his Secretary of War, John Hayes, he was saying that several times at night after he got like a battle report of like something, what's for instance, Gettysburg, that Lincoln would be crying and you'd hear him walking back and forth above him, and he wouldn't sleep sometimes at night. I mean, look at the guy's face when he went in versus when he died. He experienced a lot of stress. That's not somebody that's, I don't know. I find it very interesting. People saying he was anticipating it. I veer as we keep going. You'll kind of see where I'm going. Skip most of that, I think. Basically, it's going into stuff. I'm noticing you're not too familiar with the Civil War, so I'm trying to go into parts that you probably would. Let's see, is there anything here? Okay, so Franklin Benjamin Sanborn and George Luther Stearns and Garrett Smith. Smith had been John Brown's first financial angel. He was the son of a business partner, John Jacob Astor, from the East India Company and opium trade and the British intelligence. So we're already seeing foreign forces are courting. His mother was a Livingston. He was related to the Masonic leaders of Edward and Robert Livingston. Smith was the largest landowner in the state of New York, holding 1,000,000 acres, which including land he had given to John Brown in 1848. Smith's total contribution to John Brown's military raids and other radical causes came to more than $8 million, a tremendous sum in those days. Reverend Theodore Parker typified the religious inspiration of the abolitionist movement. His mother was a Stearns, and he was married into the Cabot family. He was educated at the Harvard Divinity School and became a leading transcendentalist and Congregationalist minister. He was always an activist in the Masonic tradition. In 1854, he had been indicted by a grand jury for inciting an attack on a courthouse where a runaway slave was being detained. He was an active member of the Vigilance Committee, and he was the principal organizer of the Secret Six to finance John Brown's raid. He later became exasperated, living in Europe, and he died in Florence, France, which is the foundation of humanism. What was his name? John Jacob Astor? Smith, sorry. Garrett Smith. So again, he's affiliated with another Masonic thing, the Secret Six. Just chuckling a little. Yeah, you're just kind of going. Somebody was saying, well, he was funded by the Secret Six. What's significant about that? Secret. I don't care if he was funded by 6 people, but the thing is, they call themselves a Secret Six. So doesn't that imply already that there's a little bit of a possible nefarious connotation with this group?
Absolutely. And why the number 6?
Now you're thinking. There's somebody else was writing something. I was like, come on. So the religious assault on the Constitution of the United States, the compact which had been drafted by the people of Shem in order to protect their religious freedom, now took an ominous turn. In 1857, the financial leaders of the Canaanite power, the House of Rothschild, assembled to celebrate the wedding of Lionel's daughter, Lenora, to her cousin, Alphonse, son of James de Rothschild of Paris. At this gathering, Disraeli, Prime Minister of the UK at the time under Queen Victoria, under this roof are the heads of the family of Rothschilds, a name famous in every capital of Europe and every division of the globe. If you like, we shall divide the United States into 2 parts, one for you, James, and one for you, Lionel. Napoleon of France, this is, I think, a descendant of Napoleon or cousin, shall do exactly in all of that I shall advise him. And that's, again, The Rothschilds by John Reeves, page 228. It's in the same book as Curse of Canaan, but I'm just saying this is what he's citing from. So this is documented. The tragic civil war, which the Canaanites planned and executed against the people of Shem in the southern states, actually began in 1859 with the invasion of the South by the homicidal maniac John Brown. The abolitionists had already spent millions of dollars to promote slave rebellions in the South, but the expensive propaganda had little effect. So we're already seeing they were instigating this. Basically, it's kind of like what we're seeing now with modern. It happened on October 7th. No, it's been going on for like 7 years. Sorry, yeah, October 7th. It's been going on for like 7 years. But somebody keeps poking the beehive. But when we finally hear about it in the news, what do we hear? Oh, you Southern hicks, blah, 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 blah. You just couldn't go along with it. No, they've been being provoked. They've had a little bit of a fear since the Haiti Rebellion of like 18-something. And now they're hearing of a group that's willing to fight for them and maybe expand on their riches. It's possible to do it without the government scrutinizing what they're doing, and also these dang abolitionists that are causing these problems. We don't really see that too much in the movies, right? We're just like, okay, this is not talked about. Not that I'm condoning slavery or the institution thereof. I am merely stating from the Southern point of view, this is how it's being perceived. Right?
That's crazy, because Rothschild and Rockefellers, they have their hand in everything in our history.
Yes.
It's crazy. Wow.
It just makes you scratch your head going, okay, so if you were here and you're also here and you're connected with this, wait a minute, are we really free? No. We're just little ants that they shake the jar of the red and the black ants, and then they have us all fight each other for their amusement and for their gain, right? They get money off of every war. That's what this is all about. This is why, again, I don't support this, that, the other thing. I'm just saying we have no rulers. I'm only submitting to God's word, and I'm going to try my best as an individual to adhere to that. That's it. That's me at the end of the day. Everybody else thinks that's crazy, but I'd rather be a saint, as in the definition, because somebody said, you're calling yourself a saint? You think you're as good as Paul? Blah, 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 blah. No. Saint means set apart. It says Antichrist will make war against the saints, people who are set apart from what? The world, the new world order, the thing that they want to establish. So therefore, when I say saint, I mean someone who's set apart from this world. They don't involve themselves with patriotism.
Right. And they've mastered the art of illusion.
Mm-hmm.
They make us feel like we have this free will.
Yeah.
And every choice that's placed in front of us or them, it's not freedom. It's really just controlled consent because they're controlling it. It's either, it's the same family. Let's split north and south. It's the same family. And they're, like I said, yeah.
It's a game for them. And if it
It
doesn't
is.
happen, not too bad. Too bad. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was almost 600,000 to 1,000,000 something people that died during the Civil War. Oh, too bad. Too bad. You split
Here.
families, you made brothers fight against brothers like this. Oh, too bad. Didn't work out. Wow. That's how you view people. Wow.
It's the same today. Nothing's changed.
Thank you. That's what I keep telling them. I said, that's the way they look at anybody in a uniform. They just laugh at you and say, thank you, cannon fodder. Keep marching.
Yeah, because they're sacrificing those people to do their bidding, basically.
Yes. Yes. So American Civil War was engineered. Again, this is just a slide, but the book kind of confirms that this is not just some random slide on the internet. That the Rothschild banking elite, the Rothschilds used a divide and conquer strategy to take back America by creating a conflict between the North and the South. So I personally think it was founded by rogue Masons. And then they were just kind of saying, okay, if we break it down, we can then start engineering it to be what we want it to be. And in 1871, they actually passed another bill basically making us a corporation, not a country.
Right.
And we actually, I think I showed that before, we have actually a filing that we are a corporation, not a country. So the North was to be the British colony annexed to Canada and under the control of Lionel Rothschild, whilst the South was to be a French colony given to Napoleon III of France and under the control of James Rothschild.
Same family.
Now, it's something interesting about Napoleon III. He was, while all this was going on, there was a very notorious ship, an armored ship of the South, known as the Alabama. You can find a book called The Alabama Affair, very worthwhile if you're just interested in, perusing a particular battles, sea battles. So it was a blockade runner because during the Civil War, Lincoln basically sent a whole bunch of ships to ensure the South could not get out their exports of cotton and kind of reduce the trade, right? And this is what France and this is what UK, they were reliant on. We're like, okay, we don't have that much up here. We need you guys to send us those resources. So the Alabama was basically acting as a little bit of an agitator, a privateer, if you will. We're sinking U.S. vessels anywhere in the world. They were all the way over into the China Seas. They were over in Cuba. They were then in port in France towards the end of the Civil War. And it was interesting because basically France was like, oh, we're neutral. We can't afford to have you guys have a battle because there was a ship that basically caught up to them. And they said, okay, France, you guys got to send them over here because we can't duke it out, but we're not leaving until these guys come out. We're gonna have to duke it out. So once I think it was like 3 miles, once they hit the international waters, they got sunk. And then when that happened, France sent over some boats to help collect the people that fell in the water. And the guy who was the captain basically was never handed over to the Union. He actually escaped and he went over to like Switzerland and stuff like that. It was like, wow. So very sus, but it does make sense when you start filling in this kind of thing going, okay, this makes sense. So Abraham Lincoln opposed the destruction of America by issuing the greenback to fund its defense against the international bankers. Basically, we're going to fund it on our own. Might be a little harder, but we're not going to be subservient and or connected financially at the hip to these guys. Now, does that sound like somebody that's actually doing what they want them to do? No. So if you had control of a history book, what would you say? He's a dictator. He's this. He's that. Blah, 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 blah. Look at everybody that opposed Lincoln, and I highly suspect you're going to find 95% were most likely Masons and or connected to the Rothschild agents. That's all I'm going to say. But here's some symbolism of the Knights of the Golden Circle. You can see. This is some pamphlets that they had. They have a little bit of the Shriner outfit. It looks very similar to the former KKK. They have the Amons with the moon, right? Moon and star. Just saying. Just saying. So. Okay, so as well, when I was saying that Russia really ticked them off after the Napoleonic Wars, and the Tsar of Russia basically says, yeah, we're not going to do the United League nation things. We're not doing that. And they're like, dang you. What Russia as well did, and I've never heard about this, being a huge Civil War buff, I'm like, we really are not filling in a lot of blanks here. In 1863, the Russians sent 2 Russian Imperial Navy visits to the United States, both on the East Coast and one on the West, from New York and San Francisco. These visits during the American Civil War were primarily a show of support and force for the Union and a strategic positioning against potential intervention from Britain or France. Now, let me give a little bit more context here. Again, they didn't pull these forces away until late July of 1864 and also August 1864. So they were sitting there almost for about a year. Reason being, now, because we have that famous quote that everybody loves to bring up, if I could end the Civil War without freeing the slaves, I would. And everybody jumps on that and says, oh, look, so say he supported slavery. Blah, 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 blah. No, because when he was a younger man, he was doing his little riverboat days, and he and his fellows, I believe it was in Louisiana, they noticed that a slave auction taking place, and Lincoln says, I have to get out of here. I can't stand it. So he was not too fond of seeing the practice. As well, when he was a child, he was about, I think, 6, 7, he saw a black man pulling a cart like a horse. Granted, it wasn't a huge cart, but he was just like, why are they doing that? That doesn't make any sense, right? So his wife did own slaves, but again, you can't exactly dictate everything your relatives do. Just saying, he wasn't fond of that. So what happened? In 1862-63, there was a Union Navy admiral that seized a ship from the South. They were sending 2 agents who are going to go to the UK and speak on behalf of, you need to support the South in this. If you guys back us up, we can give you this, we can give you that. And it was supposed to be, they're just called the Trent Affair. And this guy seized them without any proper evidence of stating that they were emissaries who were heading to the UK. So that's technically, they're neutral. They're not part of the war, so you have no right to seize the ship, for one. He commandeered it. And secondly, he was imprisoning these guys basically without due process. Like, you can't do that. They're not proven spies or emissaries. You can't do that. They have diplomatic immunity. So this became a huge scandal. And Lincoln says, all right, they're free to go. I apologize. And in essence, what the UK and France had already did, they had abolished slavery in both of their respective countries. So what Lincoln did, if I sign an Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, I would basically be stating, we are fighting to end slavery with this war. So if the UK and France now join the South, and their country's already abolished slavery, what does that say about them? Oh, that's bad press. That is a lot of bad press, because now you're basically stating to the whole rest of the world that you endorse slavery, because this is why we're fighting. So moralistically, he pulled a go ahead, I dare you moment with passing the Emancipation Proclamation. Granted, was it exactly to get rid of the slaves? Well, it did 2 for 1, right? Basically make everybody go, okay, all right, we're calling your bluff. You guys want to keep doing this. Because what the UK was going to do when they impounded their 2 ambassadors for this Trent affair thing, they were about to send all over their steel-covered ships, armored, iron ships. They were going to send them all over into Canada, and then they were going to go down the north coast and blow up all their, Navy things, and then they were going to break the blockade for the South as well. They were going to send in a whole bunch of British forces to come down from Canada, and Lincoln would have been fighting on 2 fronts. This would have been very bad. Now, to prove as well, when you watch the movie Gettysburg, it's funny that they did throw this in there. There was a British guy that was observing the battle. This was true. They did send an emissary to try to see how they could coordinate with Lee's forces. Yeah. So I'm going, guys, how come we don't talk a little more about this? Because this could have been really bad and a huge change to the U.S. But we don't talk about this, and we don't talk about Russia's interference. Because, again, that was basically, I signed this, but as well, look what I got in my corner, Russia. Yeah. So you guys want to come down over here, because America was very slow at creating these iron ships. That's why it's so significant. I think it was the Virginian and the Monitor. It was the first battle of 2 ironclad ships that were going at it. It ended in a tie because cannonballs were bouncing off of each other, but it was basically a historic moment of, okay, we're gaining a little traction here. So anyways, a little trivia. To the government's financial needs during the Civil War, President Lincoln, his secretary or treasury of the secretary, Salmon P. Chase of modern-day Chase Bank, borrowed from foreign governments and American citizens, instituted the country's first general income tax, and printed paper money, so-called greenbacks. Supposed to be a temporary income tax, but they kept it going and going and amplified it even more. So by the time we got, I think it was 1913, it became like an official thing. Salmon P. Chase, this guy was basically always in Lincoln's cabinet, would be pouting, going, I'm going to quit. I'm going to give you my resignation. I'm going to quit. I'm going to give you my resignation. If you don't do this, you don't give me what I want. You know what I mean? And so Lincoln was always like, dude, I need your services. You're really good at the field that you do. And then one day he called his bluff. And you know what he did? When he says, I'm going to call your bluff, but I'm going to promote you to the supreme head of the Supreme Court. You're going to become the new judge. That was a bad call. Salmon P. Chase was another Mason. And as well, when Lincoln was sitting in the house across the street with that bullet wound in his head, Salmon P. Chase, Vice President Johnson, and some other guy, they walked past where Lincoln was in that thing, and they were already signing in Vice President Johnson before Lincoln drew his final breath. I was like, dude, you guys are all douchebags. At least pay your condolences and, granted, it might be a hopeless situation, but ensure he at least draws his last breath, because that's when we need a vice president. Not before, even if you think it's critical condition. Again, I don't support government. I'm just laughing at the ethics here. Really, guys, they didn't care. They didn't care.
And another powerful man, Chase. They're still around today with the Chase banks. Same.
And again, we know nothing of them in history. We don't talk about it. We just gloss right over it. Another boring war, another battle. But look at all this. You see Ulysses S. Grant, again, another Mason, again, Southern, North. You can still have politics, just like today. You can have Republicans, you can have Democrats, and you can have Masons on both sides. That's totally okay. Totally okay. Because we have the black and white path, right? You can follow that path, you can follow this path. At the end of the day, you're doing exactly what we want you to do, right? Create the chaos, cause the problems. And did the generals ever have to fight? No. It's literally sitting in the background like the king and queen on the chess, or the king in the back of the chessboard, and you're watching everything go down. But the king, he never really dies unless you corner him and you have to tip him over, right? I surrender. Most of the time, he's still standing at the end of the game, right? Until you get him into a checkmate. But he doesn't die. Everybody else around him. It's the same premise. Masons can still send all these guys out. And yes, you are fighting each other. but you're going to see who's the smarter Mason, who's this, who's that, because any outcome is still a win for us as long as there's bloodshed. So you literally are using human beings as meat shields and playing games. It's kind of like you're doing digital now. Like we do it with video games. Like, I'm gonna go fight your forces, blah blah blah, and you kill some digital soldiers and all that. They're doing this with real people.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying, folks. Is again, you see Bill Wilkes doing this, and then Knights of the Golden Circle, Illuminati, Robert E. Lee, The Ideals of Chivalry. Now, it was said, allegedly, this is Mary Eben, blogspot.com. Again, don't have to agree with everything, but there's an alleged story that when Ulysses saw Grant, he came in there, and when Ulysses was talking with Grant came in, and he noticed a Native American Union soldier in the corner, and he was a little bit hesitant because, again, they're a little bit prejudiced and racist. And he says, "Don't worry, he's one of ours." And basically, because he was a fellow Mason, and then he shook his hand, and then they proceeded to have their talk. So, and these two guys, during the Mexican-American War, which Polk started, when they were winning, they went all the way down to Mexico City, and they formed a lodge there, a Masonic lodge. So the fact that these guys are now meeting during the middle of the Civil War, I was like,
Wow.
yeah, they already have past history, right?
I just heard someone talk about this Maltese cross, the Knights
Yeah.
of the that when you fold it back up, it's a pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird.
It's Masonic, a all-seeing eye. It's like a doily. It's a Masonic doily when you spread it out and then you fold it all back up, right? When you hold it like this, there's some kind of thing with when you're doing a pocket handkerchief and you have to fold it in a certain way. You hold it up like that and then you push it in there. The very idea of ties actually comes from the Masons.
Wow.
It's part of the little rope that they throw around your neck before you go in for a ceremony, and the way you tie it off. Yeah. Very interesting little things like this that are just like we do everyday normal activities without realizing where they were instituted from. And of course, they came from France, which Masons have a huge stronghold in. Yeah. So, so this is the book. Rome's Responsibility for the Assassination of Abraham Lincoln. It's like $11 on Amazon, if I remember correctly. It could have gone up, but that was like 4 or 5 years ago, probably before inflation. However, Thomas M. Harris was a general, and he was part of the prosecution during the Booth or the trial that followed for Lincoln being assassinated. Doing his own little detective work, he wrote this book in 1885 with his eyesight beginning to wear. And he was convinced that the Vatican had a hand in killing Lincoln.
Wow.
So I highly recommend picking this up because it will definitely, again, I'm giving you a lot of connect the dot clues, pick it up, read it for yourself, but it jives. A gentleman who was in there was Charles Chineke, and allegedly he was warning Lincoln, "You were about to get offed by the Jesuits." Now, Father Chineke, how Lincoln met him, he basically was a former Jesuit. He renounced it. He said, "I'm not doing this. I'm done." Lincoln was defending him, and the way Lincoln did it, he was doing it so humorously on this trial that he made the Jesuit guy who was accusing him, a former Jesuit, made him look like an idiot. And that drew the ire of the Jesuits. And he says, ever since that day, they have had it in for you. And I believe that was the 1840s, 1850s. So they held a grudge, and eventually they pulled it off. As we get here, he's talking with the president, and he says, "My dear president," I answered, "it was just this strange story I published about you which brought me here yesterday. I wanted to say a word about it, but you were too busy. Let me tell you that I wept as a child when I read the story for the first time. For not only is my impression is that it is your sentence of death, but I have from the lips of the converted priest that it is in order to excite the fanaticism of the Roman Catholic murderers."
Hey Ohana, I hope you're loving this conversation as much as I am. I just wanted to pause for a quick moment to ask for your support. If you're enjoying what you're hearing and feel like we've earned it, we'd be so grateful if you could leave us a rating or review. Your honest feedback really helps us grow and reach more people who love exploring these fascinating topics. And if you think this episode would resonate with someone you know, don't forget to share it with them. Mahalo nui loa for being part of our journey. Now, back to the show.
Murderers whom they hope to find sooner or later to strike you down. They have invented a false story of you being born within the Church of Rome and of your being baptized by a priest. They want by that to brand your face with an ignominious mark of apostasy. Do not forget that the Church of Rome, an apostate, is an outcast who has no place in society and has no right to live. The Jesuits want the Roman Catholics to believe that you are a monster and an open enemy of God and his church, and that you are to be an excommunicated man. For every apostate, the ipso facto, by that very fact, excommunicated. I have brought to you this theology of one of the most learned and approved of the Jesuits of his time, Bossenbaum, who, with many others, say that a man who will kill you will do a good work and a holy work. More than that, here is a copy of a decree from Gregory VII proclaiming that the killing of an apostate or a heretic and an excommunicated man, as you are declared to be, is not murder. Nay, it is good, a Christian act. That decree is incorporated into the canonical law that every priest must study and which every good Catholic must follow. My dear President, I must repeat to you here that what I said in Urbana of 1856, my fear is that you will fall under the blows of a Jesuit's assassin, and if you do not pay more attention than you have done till now to protect yourself, remember that because of Coligny, as he was a heretic as you are, he was brutally murdered in the St. Bartholomew night. And Henry IV was stabbed to death by a Jesuit assassin, Ravaillac, in the 14th of May, 1610, for having given the liberty of conscience to his people, and that William of Taciturn was shot dead by another Jesuit murderer called Guerand for having broken the yoke of the Pope. The Church of Rome is absolutely the same today as she was then. She does not teach today as then that she has the right, that it is her duty to punish by death any heretic who is in her way and an obstacle of her designs. The unanimity of the Catholic hierarchy of the United States is on the side of the rebels, is an incontrovertible evidence that Rome wants to destroy this republic. And as for you are, by your personal virtues, your popularity, your love for the people and liberty, your position, and your greatest obstacle is the diabolical schemes. Their hatred is concentrated upon you. You are the daily object of their maledictions. It is the breast they will direct their blows. My blood chills in my veins when I contemplate the day which may come, sooner or later, when Rome will add to all her other iniquities the murder of Abraham Lincoln. When I finished saying these things to the president, I was exceedingly moved and my voice was choked, and I could hardly retain my tears. But the president was perfectly calm, and when I had finished speaking, he took the volume from me, from my hands. So, that doesn't sound like somebody that's working with Rothschilds or the New World Order. That sounds like somebody that, okay, Jesuits, we look into the history of that. He's making enmity with them, which somebody broke this down, and I found it very interesting. You know how they say that Christ is boiling in excrement in hell, according to the Talmud?
No.
Yeah, well, they have that there. You look up, what is it, THS, but the Jesuits with the cross?
Uh-huh.
Pull down the T for the cross, and you get shite. The Jesuits are literally SHIT. THS with the T or the cross. I was going, dude. He's like, exactly. Is that a little bit of a mockery that Christ is boiling in excrement in hell, and we as his disciples, aka the Jesuits, Society of Jesus, right? They're doing it in his name. I don't know, but I was like, dude, if that's true, dang, it's right in our faces, and we didn't see it because we didn't want to see it.
True.
So, death to all heretics, death upon the soldiers of liberty. He was devoted friends among many men, and having prepared the massacre of the Admiral of Coligny and his 75,000 Protestant countrymen, and the Huguenots, by the way, rang the bells of Rome to express their joy when they heard at last that the King of France has slaughtered them all. Really look into the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, folks, if you haven't, especially if you're a Catholic, because that might make you reconsider. Just drop denominations and follow the Spirit, because this is the thing that your elites, institutions, religious sects, this is the kind of stuff that they promote. And I don't endorse it, just in general. And that's Orthodox as well. So, are you familiar with who John Surratt is?
No.
John Surratt was an accomplice, part of the several conspirators of Lincoln's assassination. He might have been a recruiter. I'm not quite sure. For Booth. I know him and Booth had an interesting affair with a gal that was known as the Lady in the Veil. I have her in a couple slides later. I forget her name. But a guy did a book thinking he knows where she went post this because she kind of disappeared. He thinks he has a theory because allegedly a lot of times when people saw her, she was always wearing one of those little black, veils over her face. Mm-hmm. But allegedly there was basically a tri-way love affair between Surratt, John Wilkes Booth, and this lady, allegedly. I don't know, but it's kind of like, okay, this is weird. Not only you're planning on killing somebody, but you're also having really weird relations. But what else is new with these people? But where the bishops of the priests of Canada, where John Surratt went to find the impossible to conceal him after the assassination. So what happened was, what town was he in? He was it Elmira? Can't remember. But John Surratt, once everything went down, he ran from New York to Canada, to Montreal. We're going to cover that in a moment. He went to Montreal and he was hiding under the care of 2 Jesuit priests. And he hid there for 4 months. Now, this is interesting because as I keep elaborating, you'll start going, wait a minute, what were you doing over in Canada? And I'm going to explain some things and showing some dates going, I was kind of thinking, man, but then, okay, this is a little bit sus, Your Honor. So anyways, he went to Canada and they found it impossible to conceal him any longer from the thousands of the detectives of the U.S. who were looking for him and ransacking Canada to find out where he retreated to. Who will conceal, feed, lodge, and protect him after the priests of Canada pressed his hand for the last time on board of the Peruvian? So basically, they started sending him overseas on the 15th of September of 1865. So they're like, all right, we hid you as long as we could. Now you're going over to the UK. Interesting thing about this, once he gets to the UK, there's somebody, I'm not sure if it was his friend or somebody that basically recognized the description. There's a $100,000 reward for all these people who are connected to the assassination. Somebody sends a telegraph, says, hey, I think we have your boy who's affiliated with all this over here. You guys want us to pick him up? Edward Stanton, Lincoln's Secretary of War, sends out a very vague message, not necessarily to apprehend, but it was vague. By the time this was done, he had escaped, and he went to a little town outside of the Vatican, and then he eventually joined the Papal Guard. Yeah, this is a little bit like, what? Okay. So, who can say without any doubt that one can suppose that anyone but the Pope himself and his Jesuits will protect the murderer of Abraham Lincoln in Europe? If you want to see him and across the ocean in Vertree at the door of Rome, there you will find him enrolled under the banners of the Pope in the 9th Company of the Zouaves, or whatever, under the false name of Watson. Of course, the Pope was forced to withdraw his protection over Surratt after the government of the United States had found him there, and they brought him back to Washington to be tried. Now, fun fact, they found him. Private detective actually joined just to get him, and he's like, this guy, we need to bring him back. So what they do, they put him up in a high room. They say, all right, you're going to be extradited back to the U.S. And allegedly, he jumped out from a second-story window and, made it good his escape. But the angle at which he would have had to jump without breaking a leg or whatever, it's not possible. So they highly suspect somebody unlocked the door, and but they said he went out the window. Yeah, sure. Eventually, he made it to Cairo, Egypt. Again, somehow this guy was really good at finding out where he went. Found him in Cairo, and then they extradited him back to the U.S. But yeah, this guy was very shifty. Okay, so. But on his arrival in the prison of the United States, his Jesuit father confessor whispered in his ear, "Fear not, you will not be condemned. Through the influence of the Roman Catholic lady, 2 or 3 of the jurymen will be Roman Catholics, and you will be safe." Those who have 2 volumes of the trial of John Surratt know that there is never more evidence of proofs of guilt were brought against a murderer in that case. The Roman Catholic countrymen who had read the Theology of St. Thomas, a book which the Pope had ordered to be taught to every college, academy, and university of Rome, had learned that it is their duty of the Roman Catholics to exterminate all heretics. They had read the decree of the Council of Constance, and no faith was to be kept with heretics. They had read the Council of Lateran, and the Catholics who armed themselves for the extermination of heretics will have their sins forgiven and receive the same blessings as those who go and fight in rescue of the Holy Land. Those jurymen who told by their father confessors that the Most Holy Father, the Pope, Gregory VII, had solemnly and infallibly declared that the killing of the heretic was no murder. And after such teachings, how could the Roman Catholic jurymen find John Surratt guilty of murder for killing the heretic Lincoln? The jurymen have disagreed. No verdict could be given, and the government was forced to let the murderer go unpunished. So John Surratt literally goes straight to the Vatican's skirt tails after all this goes down. Like, mommy, you're giving a clear indication that you had intentions of going here, and then you're saying no connections whatsoever. Okay, that's sus. We have the Father Chiniquet story. We have the proof of the Peruvian, because there was another thing where a passenger was talking with him. Yes, I talked to him on the proof. So this is not made up. There's enough evidence to track as well. When John Surratt died, after his trial, he went on tour talking about his involvement wherever. Then he died, and he was buried with full Catholic honors, like rights reserved for somebody who did great deeds for the Catholic Church. Now, you're the son of a humble shoe cobbler. What did you do on behalf of the Catholic Church, Mr. Surratt? What did you do? What, right?
Interesting. So John Wilkes Booth, he was basically a patsy?
Patsy, the guy who actually pulled the trigger. Allegedly, the plan was to kidnap Lincoln, and they were going to hold him hostage and then call an end to the war. But they kind of upgraded it. As I keep going, you're going to keep seeing as the trajectory, they kind of amped up the ante, and it was like, we got to get rid of him. But in essence, yeah, he did take the fall where they had to shut him up. Now, allegedly, when they found John Wilkes Booth's body, they found like a candle, they found like a Catholic medallion, they found the picture of the lady in there that he was engaged to. As well, it is alleged that they found his journal. And during the trial, they're talking to Edward Stanton, who was Secretary of War for Lincoln. Said, dude, you got to hand that over. That's state evidence. No. Dude, that's not a request. This is the killing of a president. You need to hand that over right away. Fine. 17 to 18 pages were missing.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's incredibly suspicious as well. Immediately after the assassination went down, how did they know to go to the boarding house of the mother Surratt She was one of the lady. That was the lady that was hanged during all of that. How did they know to go there? Booth was all over the place. How did they know that particular boarding house was affiliated with this assassination plot? How? Somebody had some foreknowledge, and I kind of have to wonder. Yeah, it's kind of sus, as the kids say today. So even the war, are you familiar with the war that happened? I think it was like 1860 to like 1866, 68, down in Mexico against France.
No.
France was at war with Mexico, and they tried to establish Maximilian again, another little puppet of this whole thing. Yeah, it did not go as planned. But basically, once the Roman Catholic Church acknowledged that the South was its own a legitimate state, its own empire, its kingdom, and endorsed by the Pope, there was a whole bunch of deserters from both Germans, Irishmen, British, and other forces that left, especially Irish Catholics, that said, okay, well, if the Pope says the South is its own entity, why am I fighting? The Pope said. So it caused Lincoln to have to establish a draft, which we hear about in a certain popular movie. What was it? Gangs of New York? With Daniel Day-Lewis and there's Leonardo DiCaprio? Yeah. Again, there's an added element. It's not the 100%, but Lincoln was even saying, if I tell the American people, when he's talking to Father Chineke, if I tell them that this is not solely a war against the states and the federal union, it will amplify into a religious war, which will make it 10 times more bloody and 10 times more destructive. I have to keep it where it's at. This is already one indication. Now, imagine you're getting these stats, and then somebody comes in and says, yeah, I think the Jesuits want to. It's like, I can't tell everybody this. Just saying. It does make sense. Now, this book, Montreal, City of Secrets, fills in a lot of blanks. I probably give it about 3 out of 5, maybe a 3.5, because whoever was the publishing people, they have a lot of parts where it kind of rebooted the same thing that you just wrote like 4 or 5 pages ago or a couple chapters back. And I was like, that kind of screws you over with the formatting or whatever. But overall, it does fill in a lot of blanks. He gets a lot of material and explaining how Montreal basically was a hub for the Confederates. You were using it basically as a spy running station. Yes. And it's interesting. His name is Barry Sheetree. Anyways, buy it. You can look it up. He gives a nice little outline of all the main players. You know, they had Toronto as well, Halifax. They had little hubs all over in Canada. Now, Canada was allegedly neutral. So why are you allowing a foreign force in your country to operate on the northern side? Sus. Yeah, Sarah Slater. That was the Lady of the Veil. That was her name. Whom they were having a possibly tri relationship with. And then there was, what is his name? Yeah, okay, so Bennett Young and the St. Albans Raid. Are you familiar with the St. Albans Raid?
No.
So, St. Albans Raid, very little interesting bit of history that a lot of people do not know about, is that there was the Southern Cavalry contingent that allegedly rode all the way up from the south through like Minnesota, Great Lakes area. They came over, they were in the Montreal region, and then they took a whack at a Vermont town called St. Albans. Basically, as Sherman was going through the South, splitting the South, you know, burning up Georgia and all this stuff, they decided to do okay, what if we made them think that we're having the ability to attack them on 2 fronts? They think they're winning, but then we can say we have they might think we have even a better force than we do, hitting them in the north, right? So this freaked them out, and a lot of people were going, hold up, why are they allowed to freaking ride through a neutral territory in order to attack us? That doesn't make any sense. So they actually apprehend this Bennett Young guy, and they imprison them. But it's like, while they're imprisoned or they're waiting for their trial, they're being brought to dinners by there's a lot of Canadian socialites and the elites. They're thinking that they're heroes, and in America, they're going, what the frick, people? Like, I thought Canada was neutral. They're our neighbors. And they're over here celebrating these people that just gave us a huge scandal. Huge scandal. But it does make you start going, what's going on up there, Canada? Oh, Canada? So this was a controlled Rothschild agent, Benjamin Judah. And this little D-bag, sorry, I really do not like this guy. He was also a creep. In one of the books I was reading, allegedly he dug up the body, or he had the nightgown of his daughter and or wife, and he was sleeping next to it. It was kind of creepy, little necra. Yeah, don't like him. But yeah, both were controlled by Rothschild. Seward, I highly suspect, was as well, because while all this contingencies is going on, a lot of people were going up into Canada to make deals with the British Empire, saying, how can we sue for peace without necessarily speaking on behalf of Lincoln? Like, what can I do for myself to settle the war? As well, there was a cotton for contraband. In October of 1864, Lincoln actually was going to settle basically a deal with the South. I will give you guns, weapons, and ammo. This is before the end of the war, in exchange for cotton and all this other stuff, because we are running really low after like 3.5 years of war on supplies to maintain our facilities. So we'll give you weapons if you give us a little bit of supplies in order to do this. Now remember, October of 1864, that's right before your second term of election. I'm like, that's scandalous. That's like basically saying, it's okay, we have problems with Iran, but we're just going to sign off this weapons deal before we sign a peace treaty. What? Like, not good. But again, back then, news traveled a little slower and stuff like that, but this was a thing that was going on. This was Sarah Slater, and the gentleman on the right was known as Captain P.C. Martin. Now, he was a gentleman that wrote letters of introduction from Montreal, and basically was the same guy who probably wrote the letter of introduction for the British guy that came down to check out Lee's forces. It was likely this guy. He had connections with Dr. Mudd, who was the individual that Booth went to first see after his leg got shot. So even though they're trying to say he was innocent, and really part of the route that the Booth took was connections to this guy. So again, another little bit of a sus thing. Prior to the war, he was a Catholic Bible seller. Again, weird that these keep popping up of, okay, want to say you're wrong, but that is another little weird. This is John Surratt in full Papal Guard regalia. This is something you as well can Google. It's not something I'm making up. So again, why does Booth's conspirator? I don't know. Don't know, but there's definitely more that meets the eye. Which again, the Jesuit order, we see the all-seeing eye all over in the Catholic Church.
Weird.
We see it on our money too. So I don't know. Which I said before, Eyes of Tammuz, Nimrod's son. I don't have to read it all again, but it's affiliated with Nimrod's son, the all-seeing eye. Or when you say money, do you know what that etymology is?
No.
Mano, mano, mane, one eye.
You're right.
Yeah.
Wow, weird.
So it doesn't matter where the currency is, but isn't it weird that in America, that's the currency and that symbol is on our
Yeah, why is
that? Yeah. So that hat we just saw. This is the Knights of the Golden Circle. And this is a random priest that was
random.
Catholic cross. Looks very similar to the thing I showed earlier. And again, the Catholic Church helped a lot with the Nazis. They persecuted a little bit. But in comparison, they also helped a lot of bad guys escape to Argentina. So is there anything there, Brandon? Come on. Maybe I am overthinking it. Let's keep going. This is some sketches from inside the lodges. Again, this is Semiramis, Nimrod's wife, mother. And this is Tammuz. But you notice a little crescent moon on their foreheads?
Oh, yeah.
And then they have the little triangle, the all-seeing eye on sitting over their heads when they go into meetings.
Oh, yeah.
You have a similar sun like the Jesuits.
Yeah, and the cross and bones.
Skull and bones, correct. Just saying, kind of interesting. Maybe there's nothing there. I see something there. So this gentleman, he was a pool player. His name was Joseph Dion. And he said a form of a double karam and bag the biggest game this side of hell. In billiard terms, the term karam refers to the act of sinking more than one ball simultaneously. When talk turned to the upcoming election with Lincoln's prospects, Booth, who was in Canada playing against this guy in a little casual thing at the hotel, "It makes damn little difference who wins," Booth said. "Head or tails, Abe's contract is nearly up, and whether he is reelected or not, his goose is cooked." Dion thought that this was just boozy bravado until he heard that Lincoln's assassination 6 months later in April of 1865. So, hearing something about 6 months ahead of time, there's rumors that this was even big talk going on in the hotel roughly in late February, early March. And your Secretary of War, who's supposed to be in charge of security, didn't do anything? Okay, hold on, there's more. During Booth's stay in Montreal, a young messenger named George Isles formed a friendship with the actor. A hero worship might be a better description of their relationship. Isles delivered messages from a number of locals, including John Buckland, owner of Montreal's Royal Theatre and a friend of Booth's. The impressionable young man remembered Booth brandishing a large knife, very possibly the same knife used to slash Major H. Rathbone in Lincoln's box at the Ford's Theater. While promising to make short work of the president, kidnapping may have been Booth's original aim. But his behavior and choice of words in Montreal suggested that he was contemplating a more lethal outcome. Finally, we know that the members of Edwin Stanton, the Secretary of War, big bearded guy, necrophilia, Chief of Spy Lafayette Baker was a regular at the St. Lawrence Hall. He was at this hotel. He was a spy. He was present when Booth got shot. Lafayette Baker, when they re-exhumed his body, died of arsenic poisoning. He was the only other person that saw Booth's journal.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I wonder. Sounds like a spy thriller to me. Anyways, Lafayette Baker was a regular at St. Lawrence Hall, as well as his brother-in-law, Edwin Stanton, Walter Pollock, who was a national detective of the police in the U.S. So not only did your Secretary of War have your chief spy in that area, who was a frequent, but you also had your brother-in-law there. And not only that, he signed his name, this brother-in-law, right underneath Sarah Slater, who was a known cohort of Booth. It was like literally right after each other. You didn't sign a ledge like John Smith, whatever. It's a time of war. You're a detective. You're part of the legal forces of the enemy. What are you doing signing your name in the ledger book like that? Doesn't make sense unless you don't care. Blah, 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 and was also a national detective of the police. Pollock checked into the hotel on the same day as John Wilkes Booth on October 18th of 1864. Lafayette Baker checked in a few days earlier as John L. Baker. No point of departure or room number is given. A hotel, much like a ship, is a small place where gossip and rumors flourish. Booth made little attempt to disguise his violent intentions towards Lincoln, especially when he was drinking, and that no one in the hotel overheard or reported these threats. The National Detective Police present remains astonishing. Yeah. So you had 6 months in advance to say we need to beef up security until this guy's apprehended, or just till everything settles down. Okay, because we've got a hothead that sounds pretty serious. Didn't do it, and this is a confirmed Confederacy hub. Didn't do it. Why? So again, this is the Trent affair that I was talking about earlier with the pictures. They were abducted to stop any emissarial visit going to the UK and France. And the St. Albans raid. What did I just say? Booth checked in on October 18th of 1864. St. Albans raid. October 19th, 1864. The day after. Now, I don't want to say it, but was Edward Stanton acting a double agent with his chief spy and his brother-in-law up there? Were you giving orders saying now's the time to strike? I don't know. But the timing, the dates, there's something there. So again, this is another suppressed history of America banking. Everyone's always saying, Brandon, can you please bring up the books? Here's some books. Buy some books. Have some fun. But allegedly, Andrew Jackson, he said the bank is trying to kill me, but I will kill it. And I tried to assassinate him, failed. And then Lincoln, at this time, I faced two enemies, the Confederate Army in the front of me and the banks behind me. Of the two, the one at my rear is my greatest enemy.
Wow.
So banking, religious, you have all these little things. We have this slide and one more and we're done. So, this is from a book called God's Bankers. It's the size of like one of these, big book, almost 700 pages by Gerald Posner, Gerald Posner, Posner. He had this little excerpt in here. The guy's a Catholic author, so no bias here. The Vatican's antiquated view about money meant that it did nothing to encourage fiscal growth or industrial development in the papal states. The economy stagnated, and over decades, tax revenues steadily declined. By the time that Gregory XVI, the son of a lawyer, became pope in 1831, the situation was so dire that it felt compelled to do something remarkable. He borrowed money from the Rothschilds. Europe's preeminent Jewish banking dynasty, the $400,000 loan, an equivalent of $43 million in 2014, was a lifeline to the church. The Rothschilds had a solid reputation when it came to bailing out distressed governments. Sounds familiar? They had steadied Austria's finances after the Napoleonic Wars and provided enough money to squash two rebellions in Sicily. James de Rothschild, head of the family's Paris-based headquarters, became the official papal banker. So we're seeing a traction here. Like we're going to split the union. He's the papal. Again, he said the South was ordained by the Pope. Like, yeah, thumbs up. It's definitely. I'm just saying we're seeing a connection here from all these different views. One of the brothers, Karl, who ran the family's Naples branch, began traveling to Rome to consult with the Pope. Their financial empire prompted a mixture of envy and resentment among the church officials. Most traditionalists who referred to James as the leader of the international Jewry were appalled that the church had resorted to Christ killers for their financial succor. French poet Alfred de Vigny wrote that a Jew now reigns over the Pope and Christianity. He pays the monarchs and buys the nations. German political writer Karl Ludwig born Loeb Baruch, had changed his name upon becoming a Lutheran, thought that Gregory had demeaned the Vatican by giving Karl Rothschild an audience. Born noted that a wealthy Jew kisses the Pope's hand, whereas a poor Christian kisses the Pope's feet. He fanned the distrust among many of the faithful, and the Rothschilds are assuredly nobler than their ancestor Judas Iscariot. He sold Christ for 30 small pieces of silver, and the Rothschilds would buy him if he were for sale.
Wow.
Interesting thing about this Pope that they're inferring, he gave us the rest of the marble to finish our Washington, D.C. monument.
Oh.
Mason started it. He finished it like in 1850 something. That makes me go, okay, why do you feel so generous? And as well, out of all the countries in Europe who heard about the assassination of Lincoln, they sent their condolences. The one country who did not, the Vatican. And in the year following, I believe it was 1866, we passed legislation forbidding all ambassadorial funds to the Vatican. This was not overturned until Lincoln's visit to the Popery back in 1950s. 1950s, 1980 something. For almost 100 years, we somehow said no. After that, we're not doing it. So it makes me wonder, did we kind of know, but nobody wanted to say that part out loud?
Yeah.
Don't know. But in closing, this gentleman, as I said before, the incredible Scofield and his book, aka when he wrote the Scofield translation of the Bible, that we need to love the chosen people and all this stuff. The guy who distributed his version of the Bible was a Rothschild agent, as we said before earlier in the video. He also founded our IRS, or IRIS, all-seeing eye. Say Siri backwards. Iris, Siri. Yeah. Founder and distributed the Z-friendly Bible. Now, you don't have to necessarily believe me, but what do we say? He has an eagle eye. IRS, look at this. It got scales and an eagle. And it's like, Brandon, come on. You're really pulling at strings here. This is the IRS. 2 pillars on each side. Mason. But then Israeli Supreme Court has an all-seeing eye atop of it.
Wow.
So we're being judged by monetary mono. What does it say? The beast shall, you won't be able to buy or sell unless you have the mark.
Yep.
So anyways, in closing, the gentleman who is now the exchequer of the Vatican and World Banks, Donald J. Trump, who went to Jesuit schools. I close. That's it.
That is crazy. Oh my God, that was absolutely incredible.
Hour 50? I think we did almost hour 50. Woo! Short.
Wow,
nice.
Wow.
For me.
Boy, that was incredible. Wow, I love that breakdown. It was powerful and it was thought-provoking as always. I
just
truly
want to make
appreciate
people look in corners and shadows, and because the official narrative where they're trying to paint him as a dictator, or they're all part of the club, whatever route they want to go, there's these avenues where I'm going, yeah, but compare, contrast. What about this? What about that? And they just don't want to do that, even though when you break it down, it says it sounds like he was causing an obstacle financially for the Rothschilds, right? Even though he was using their own, again, I'm wearing the federal government. I'm playing your game to disrupt exactly what you're trying to do now. So I don't know.
That's crazy. I've never heard of most of what you said. I've never heard of it. I never heard of the Confederacy being in Canada, or the Pope being involved. I've never heard of that. That's incredible.
Or the Masonic Jesuit Alliance. And there was also as well, I think it was in Minnesota, these two guys, I think it was like 2 days prior, 2 Jesuits, they were in a store and they were talking about how Lincoln was dead or was going to die. And they were going, and this guy was overhearing this conversation. He's like, I didn't hear anything in the news. And we're like 3-4 days, out from when anything would, news would hit us. So it was kind of a little bit suspicious. Like, how did you 2 Jesuits know that Lincoln was going to die?
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. A lot of things make you go, I think there's some validity to look into those books.
Yes, absolutely. Very thought-provoking as always. I really appreciate your time, your heart, and the depth you bring in every discussion. Oh my goodness.
Nobody wants to talk to me for it.
Oh my gosh. Well, you're always welcome here. I'm open to anything you want to talk
Appreciate
about.
that.
Anytime, no problem. For those who want to dive deeper into your work and stay connected with you, where can they find you and your work?
Yeah. Mana, that's 2 N's, Mana Daily Podcast, Spotify, Rumble, and YouTube. And then if you can, Patreon, which for older folks, that is basically going to your own little PBS account. And you are sending a customized amount of whatever you think is, affordable, $2, $3, $5, $10. I wouldn't expect 20. Some people do, and thank God that they do, because I wouldn't be able to make time to do shows with Mia here if I did not have that backing. So, as I said, if not, tier 1 is always prayer or a share. And then, and then Krollology, KROLLology. _101 on Instagram. If you can find me censored, but I'm sure you can, copy paste whatever. And that's all I got. Thanks for having me on.
I'd like to thank my guest, Brandon Kroll, for joining me and bringing the topic of Abraham Lincoln to the table. Guys, make sure to follow, subscribe, and share the episode with anyone who'd appreciate this kind of deep dive. And don't forget to follow Brandon and stay up to date with his latest work. See you guys on the next show. Take care. Bye.